It was an ordinary day until he disappeared without a word, leaving behind only questions and heartbreak. The truth behind his absence would haunt his family for years to come. It was a Tuesday, gray and slow, the kind of morning where the world seems to move underwater. Ellen sat at the kitchen table in her thin bathrobe, pouring cereal for her youngest Leah, whose feet barely touched the linoleum floor. Her son, Matt, sat hunched over his math homework, pencil tapping a frantic rhythm. Ellen glanced at the clock, already 7:28, and wondered why the coffee tasted burnt, why her husband Peter was still not back from his morning jog. Peter always returned by 7. Every morning, he'd leave before dawn, tracing the sleepy suburban streets in his worn-out sneakers, returning just in time to kiss Leah's head and tousle Matt's hair before heading to work. But today, the house was silent except for the shuffling of spoons and the hum of the refrigerator. Ellen tried to call his phone. No answer. She left a message, light, cheerful, fighting a prickle of worry. "Hey, we're waiting on you. Call when you get this." Time stretched. Matt finished his homework, Leah fussed about her hair bows, the school bus honked twice outside. Ellen ushered the kids out, waving goodbye with forced calm, and watched the yellow bus disappear down the street. The clock said 8:03. She tried calling again. Nothing. By 8:30, worry gnawed through her. Peter was never late, never missed work, never left her in the dark, not once in 15 years. She paced from the kitchen to the front door, peeking out as if he might jog up the sidewalk, smiling and winded. The house felt too large, every sound amplified. By 9 o'clock, Ellen was dialing his office. "He's not here, Mrs. Harris," said the receptionist, her voice flat. "Did he say he'd be late?" Ellen lied. "Maybe he got stuck in traffic." She left her number and hung up, hand shaking. She checked his closet, his wallet gone, but the drawer with his watch, his ring, his favorite cufflinks undisturbed. His shoes were missing from the mat, his windbreaker still draped over the stair banister. In the bathroom, his toothbrush sat in the cup, still damp. Ellen wandered the hallway, looking for some sign, some clue that would explain why her husband wasn't here. At 10:20, a neighbor, Mrs. Delgado, knocked to ask if she'd seen Peter's blue car. "I noticed it's not in the driveway," she said, squinting in concern. Ellen forced a smile and shrugged. "He went for a run." The lie tasted strange. By noon, panic had bloomed in Ellen's chest. She called her sister, babbling about Peter's disappearance, the empty street, the unanswered phone. Her sister urged her to call the police, but Ellen hesitated. What would she say? He was just out for a run. Maybe he was at the gym, maybe he needed space, maybe. She shut her eyes, feeling the heaviness of dread. At 1 o'clock, she called the police. An officer arrived, soft-spoken and polite, jotting notes on a worn pad. "When did you last see him?" "Before sunrise, when he left to jog." "Did he take anything with him?" "Just his phone and wallet, I think." The officer nodded, asked about stress, marital problems, anything unusual. Ellen answered honestly. Peter was steady, reliable, not prone to drama or sudden impulses. The officer promised to file a report. He handed Ellen a card with a number to call. "Let us know if he comes back, or if you remember anything else." By late afternoon, Matt and Leah returned home to find their mother red-eyed but smiling too hard. "Dad's out running errands," Ellen lied, stirring soup she could barely swallow. She helped with homework, checked backpacks, and answered the phone each time it rang. It was always someone else. The school, her sister, Peter's boss, the police with no new information. That night, Ellen lay awake listening for the familiar jangle of Peter's keys in the door. But the only sounds were Leah's gentle snoring and Matt's restless turning in bed. In the morning, Peter was still gone. Ellen's world, once predictable and safe, felt suddenly as fragile as a pane of glass. Ellen woke before dawn, her head pounding with questions that offered no answers. The bed beside her was untouched, sheets cool and undisturbed. She moved through the house in silence, flicking on lights as if to banish the fear that crept into every shadow. The children still slept, curled tight beneath their blankets, unaware of how much the world had changed overnight. By 6, Ellen was on the phone, first with the police, then Peter's office, then her own mother, voice cracking as she repeated the same facts. "He left for a run. He hasn't come home. I don't know what happened." The police asked for a recent photo, which Ellen found in a hallway frame. Peter on the porch, arms around Leah and Matt, sunburned and laughing. She scanned and sent it, heart racing as she clicked send. The day moved in slow motion. 2 officers arrived to ask more questions, walking the block and showing neighbors Peter's photo. Mrs. Delgado remembered seeing him jog past her rose bushes at dawn, waving as usual. No one else had noticed anything strange, a delivery truck, a stray dog, nothing out of place. Ellen called the hospitals. None had admitted a man matching Peter's description. She searched for clues in the small spaces of their life together. Drawers, coat pockets, his laptop, nothing but old emails and half-written grocery lists. She checked bank accounts. No activity. Peter's cell went straight to voicemail. The news spread quickly through the neighborhood. Ellen's phone rang all day, friends offering casseroles, co-workers promising prayers, distant relatives calling with concern and questions. Ellen gave the same answers over and over, her voice growing flat with exhaustion. By noon, the house filled with a parade of casseroles and solemn faces, everyone asking the same thing. "Do you think he'll come back?" Matt tried to keep busy with video games, eyes darting to his mother whenever she passed by. Leah clung to her doll, asking over and over when Daddy would be home. Ellen smiled, reassured, then retreated to the bathroom to cry in private. By afternoon, the police organized a small search. Volunteers walked the jogging route Peter usually took, through the park, around the lake, past the bakery with the green awning. They found nothing but wet leaves, empty sidewalks, and a sense of unreality. Ellen joined them, her shoes squelching in the mud, eyes scanning every yard for a sign, a dropped wallet, a scuffed sneaker, any trace of Peter at all. As darkness fell, Ellen thanked the neighbors who returned, muddy and tired, hands empty. She tucked Leah into bed, answered Matt's whispered, "Is Dad dead?" with a gentle, "We don't know, sweetheart. We have to hope." That night, Ellen sat at the kitchen table long after the house grew quiet. She traced the outline of Peter's mug, the groove his keys left on the counter, the worn spot on the floor where he always stood to tie his shoes. She wrote lists, who to call, what to ask, things to check in the morning. She opened Peter's closet and buried her face in his shirt, breathing in the scent of soap and sweat, her heart aching with the weight of absence. Before dawn, Ellen drifted into uneasy sleep, her dreams restless and sharp. Somewhere, in the back of her mind, she kept hoping to wake and find Peter standing in the kitchen, smiling and apologizing for scaring her. But the house remained silent, and the world outside offered no answers. Morning sunlight crept through the blinds, painting pale stripes across the floor. Ellen sat with a mug of cold coffee, her mind numb from another sleepless night. The house was tense, every sound sharp, the whir of the refrigerator, the slap of the mailbox, the steady tick of the clock that marked each hour Peter was still missing. Matt emerged first, eyes swollen, refusing breakfast and mumbling, "Gotta go." Ellen watched him trudge out to the bus stop, hands shoved deep in his pockets. Leah wandered in next, clutching her doll by the arm. "Is Daddy coming back today?" she asked, her voice small. Ellen knelt, hugging her tight, whispering, "I hope so, sweetheart. I hope so." When the children left, Ellen began searching for answers in every corner. She called the police station for updates. No new information, no leads. The missing person flyer was now posted in the local grocery, the church foyer, and every coffee shop for miles. Ellen texted Peter's friends and old co-workers, asking if anyone had seen or heard from him. She checked their bank account again, holding her breath. Nothing. Bills arrived. Ellen paid what she could, making uneasy calculations. Without Peter's paycheck, the numbers on her notepad grew smaller each day. The refrigerator grew emptier, the house colder as she lowered the thermostat to save money. A week after Peter disappeared, Ellen's mother drove in from 2 towns over, suitcases clattering down the hallway. She brought groceries and a stern resolve, taking over the kitchen and shepherding the children through homework and bedtime. Ellen surrendered, grateful and ashamed, as her mother quietly paid the utility bill and filled the gas tank in Ellen's car. Matt became sullen, snapping at Leah, refusing to do homework. He stayed late at school, sitting by himself on the playground swings after practice. Leah began waking from nightmares, crying for her father, climbing into Ellen's bed at midnight, her small arms clutching tight around her mother's neck. The police revisited the house, combing through phone records and emails, searching for any sign of where Peter had gone. They asked Ellen about debts, arguments, secrets she might not have known. "Did he seem unhappy? Did he say anything odd lately?" Ellen shook her head, but their questions gnawed at her. Had she missed a sign? That Friday, Ellen's boss called, sympathetic, but needing to know if she would return to work soon. Ellen promised she would, her voice hollow. After hanging up, she stared at the clock, realizing how quickly responsibility had caught up. She would have to be both mother and father now, breadwinner and comforter, detective and nurse. Saturday night brought a flicker of hope. A neighbor called, saying she'd seen a man who looked like Peter at a downtown bus stop. Ellen raced there with her mother, the car rattling over potholes, heart hammering in her chest. But the man was a stranger, face shadowed and unfamiliar. Ellen thanked the neighbor, drove home with her hands shaking, and climbed the stairs to tuck in her children, swallowing her disappointment as she kissed their foreheads. That night, after the house had grown silent, Ellen stood at the window, watching taillights flicker in the distance. She let the tears come, heavy, aching sobs that seemed to hollow out her chest. She pressed her palm to the cold glass, whispering Peter's name into the darkness, hoping against hope that somewhere he might hear her and find his way back home. Another week passed. Ellen's mother took over more and more, walking Leah to school, fixing meals, organizing Matt's chores. Ellen returned to her job at the local hardware store, her eyes always flicking to the door, half hoping each time a customer entered. Her boss gave her extra shifts, quietly letting her leave early when the phone rang or anxiety twisted her stomach into knots. Money tightened like a noose. Ellen sold Peter's old bicycle, listed spare furniture on a neighborhood app, and cut coupons with her mother at the kitchen table. Each transaction brought a pang. One less piece of the life she'd built with Peter, one more reminder that he was truly gone. Matt took to eating in silence, his grade slipping, the spark in his eyes dimmed. Leah drew pictures of their family, always including her father, stick-thin and smiling, with question marks floating above his head. The police brought new questions but few answers. A detective called to say there was still no sign of Peter's credit card or cell activity. Ellen clung to routine, packing lunches, ironing work shirts, keeping up with bills. Her wedding ring left a pale circle on her finger when she slipped it off to wash dishes. She found herself tracing that mark in quiet moments. One Saturday, Ellen's church held a food drive. She hesitated, pride burning, but her mother insisted. Everyone needs help sometimes. They returned with 2 bags of groceries, canned beans, pasta, a loaf of white bread. Ellen thanked the volunteers, her cheeks flushed. Matt lashed out more, slamming doors, skipping soccer practice. Ellen tried to talk to him, sitting on his bed late at night, but he only stared at the ceiling, fists clenched. "He left us, Mom," he finally said, voice shaking. "He left us with nothing." Ellen reached for him, but Matt rolled away, shoulders hunched in silent accusation. Leah grew clingier, following Ellen from room to room, whispering, "Don't leave me too." She wet the bed, stopped eating her favorite foods, and woke crying most nights. Ellen rocked her gently, promising, "I'm not going anywhere," even as doubt gnawed inside. That week, the bills outpaced Ellen's pay. Her car broke down, alternator gone. The mechanic, a kindly man who'd known Peter, offered a discount, but it was still more than she could afford. Ellen borrowed from her mother, hands trembling as she wrote an IOU on the fridge. Late one night, as Ellen folded laundry, she found an envelope tucked inside Peter's old work jacket. Her heart pounded. Was it a clue? Inside was a faded note, a list of groceries, a reminder to pick up Leah from ballet, and a scrawled, "Love you. P." Ellen clutched the note, fresh tears falling. The ordinariness of it, the casual love, stabbed deeper than any official report. That Sunday, as Ellen sat in church beside her mother and children, she listened to the choir's hymn, letting the music carry her grief. Afterward, neighbors pressed her hand, slipping her small bills, promising prayers, offering casseroles. Ellen thanked them, her voice steady, face betraying nothing. She wondered if she'd ever stop scanning every crowd for Peter's face, if the ache of his absence would ever dull. As the sun set, Ellen stood at the window, Leah asleep on the couch, Matt playing quietly with his phone. She watched the neighborhood slip into dusk, porch lights flickering on, dogs barking in distant yards. The world went on, indifferent to her loss. Ellen pressed her hand to the window, the house behind her echoing with the memories of a man who had simply vanished, leaving nothing but questions, debts, and the hollow ache of a family trying desperately to survive. Days blurred into one another, routines tightening like a belt around Ellen's life. Her mother kept the household steady, but cracks showed, bills overdue, cupboards thinner, tempers fraying at the edges. Matt withdrew further, sometimes disappearing for hours after school, returning only when Ellen called friends and coaches in panic. Leah became listless, her drawings now full of rain and shadowed faces. The police called less frequently, but each time, Ellen's hope flickered. She answered every unknown number, her voice always taut with longing. "Hello? Yes, this is Ellen Harris." One call brought a jolt. A detective said there'd been a possible sighting of Peter in a town 2 hours away. Ellen's mother agreed to watch the children, and Ellen drove the lonely highway, nerves stretched thin. At the diner where Peter had supposedly been seen, Ellen questioned the manager, showing the same photo she carried everywhere. The waitress shook her head. "I'm sorry, ma'am. That man looked older, hair was grayer." Ellen's shoulders sagged, relief and disappointment twisting together. She drove home at dusk, headlights carving through the rain, the empty seat beside her more obvious than ever. Back at work, Ellen juggled shifts and paperwork, sometimes hiding in the storeroom to cry. Her boss, Mr. Martinez, offered support, letting her leave early when the kids needed her, bringing by a sack of groceries now and then, always with quiet kindness. Ellen's co-workers filled in the gaps where they could, and even customers, hearing her story, pressed $5 and $10 bills into her hand with a squeeze and a murmured, "Hang in there." Matt's school called, his grades were slipping further, and he'd gotten into a shoving match at recess. Ellen met with the guidance counselor, a gentle woman who listened and offered resources, suggesting Matt join a group for kids dealing with loss. Matt refused at first, but after a long evening of silence, Ellen found him reading one of the pamphlets. His shoulders slumped. Leah's teacher sent home a note. Leah had been crying in class, struggling to focus, sometimes asking if she could call her father. Ellen read the words with a knot in her stomach, then sat beside Leah's bed that night, stroking her hair until she drifted to sleep. Ellen's mother urged her to talk to a lawyer, but there was little legal recourse. No sign of Peter, no financial trail, no life insurance to claim. The house was now full of lists and reminders: call the bank, apply for aid, check with social services. Ellen stood in line at the welfare office, heart pounding, filling out forms for food stamps and emergency rent support, answering each question as if in a dream. A neighbor, Mr. Bridges, offered to repair the fence Peter had started. On Saturday, he arrived with tools, and Matt, after much prodding, went out to help. They worked in the yard, not speaking much, but by afternoon, the old boards were straight again, the gate swinging smoothly. Ellen brought out lemonade, watching Matt stand a little taller beside the finished work, a small smile ghosting his lips. The weekend closed with Ellen balancing her checkbook by lamplight, stretching every dollar, her mother asleep on the couch, Leah curled up beside her, and Matt reading in silence. The house, though battered by absence, held on to the rhythm of survival. Ellen tucked the faded note from Peter into her wallet, a talisman of a life not so long ago, a reminder that love, even abandoned, could still shape what came next. A month turned, then another. Ellen learned to move through days with numb efficiency, checking boxes and following routines. Her mother was a fixture now, her calm, no-nonsense strength holding the family together in ways Ellen couldn't always manage herself. Mornings meant rising early to pack lunches and coax Leah out of bed. Matt started waking himself, often gone before Ellen could say goodbye. His room was messy, clothes in heaps, notebooks under the bed, sports gear thrown in the corner. Ellen worried, but pressed him only gently, knowing that too many questions would send him further away. Bills arrived with steady dread. Ellen visited the food pantry every other week, always smiling for the volunteers, always grateful but embarrassed. She'd picked up a weekend shift at the store, leaving Leah and Matt with their grandmother, praying nothing would go wrong while she was away. Leah's anxieties surfaced in new ways, refusing to go to birthday parties, clinging at bedtime, asking for stories about when Daddy was still here. Ellen answered as best she could, painting Peter as loving, patient, fun, even as anger and betrayal sometimes gnawed at her heart. She started keeping a journal, scribbling out memories, confessions, prayers for strength. Matt had good days and bad. He joined the after-school group for grieving kids, sometimes coming home quiet, sometimes with a story to share. One afternoon, Ellen found him in the garage, tinkering with Peter's old toolbox. "Thought I'd fix Mom's garden chair," he mumbled. She hugged him, holding on a little too long, feeling the ache of pride and sadness mingled. At school conferences, teachers praised Leah's sweetness, noted her shyness. For Matt, there were warnings about slipping grades, but also encouragement. He'd started tutoring another student in math, showing flashes of the big brother care Ellen remembered from before. Ellen herself found small moments of escape, a book borrowed from a friend, a coffee shared with her boss, a new casserole recipe clipped from the local paper. She set up a new checking account in her own name, saw a counselor once a week, and joined a support group for families of the missing. Each meeting brought a little relief, a place where she could speak the truth out loud, where her pain wasn't something to hide. One evening, after Leah's bath, the doorbell rang. It was Mrs. Delgado with a plate of cookies and a note signed by dozens of neighbors. "We're here for you." Ellen blinked back tears as she accepted their kindness, feeling for a moment less alone in the world. Summer approached. The yard, once Peter's domain, was now a jungle. Matt and Ellen mowed and pulled weeds, laughing as Leah helped by picking wildflowers for the kitchen table. There were no answers about Peter, no clues from the police, but life, stubbornly, continued. At the end of each day, as she closed Leah's door and turned off the kitchen light, Ellen would pause in the hallway, listening for the familiar footfall she knew would never come. The ache never faded, but in its place was a fragile, stubborn hope that somehow, someway, they would go on. Summer arrived in waves of heat and thunderstorms, the air thick and heavy. Ellen found herself moving more slowly, tired deep in her bones but driven by necessity. Each day brought its share of challenges: a broken washing machine, a sudden fever for Leah, Matt forgetting his keys and waiting for hours on the porch, sunburnt and impatient. Despite the endless to-do list, some days sparkled. Ellen's mother planted a vegetable garden in the backyard, coaxing tomatoes and beans from the stubborn soil. Leah helped, her hands muddy, her laughter ringing out when she spotted a worm or chased a butterfly across the lawn. Matt mowed the grass, careful around the edges of the new beds, sometimes inviting a friend from the grief group to play basketball or work on bikes. One Saturday, Ellen's co-workers organized a small cookout, bringing food, folding chairs, and paper lanterns. The backyard filled with voices and music, Leah weaving through legs with a popsicle, Matt tossing a football across the fence. Ellen watched the scene with gratitude and surprise, realizing that, for a few hours, the shadow of Peter's disappearance had eased, replaced by warmth and community. Bills still loomed, but with her mother's help and careful planning, Ellen stayed afloat. She visited the food pantry less often, clipping coupons and stretching every dollar. The support group became her lifeline, a place to vent frustration, share victories, and cry freely when the ache became too much. Leah started sleeping in her own bed again, the nightmares receding as summer went on. She brought home a painted flower pot for Ellen, presenting it with a shy smile. "It's for Daddy," she whispered. Ellen hugged her tightly, pressing her face into Leah's sun-warmed hair. Matt's teacher sent a postcard, "Matt's doing better, helping classmates, more focused. You should be proud." Ellen pinned it to the fridge, a tiny flag of hope. Matt himself seemed steadier, sometimes talking about Peter without anger, sometimes joining Ellen and Leah for a late-night movie, arms flung carelessly across the couch. Through it all, Ellen worked. She learned to fix small things around the house, watched YouTube videos for plumbing and patching walls. She made a list of goals: get a raise, start an emergency fund, help Leah join Girl Scouts, take Matt to see his favorite baseball team. She didn't always believe in the future, but writing it down felt like a promise, if only to herself. The anniversary of Peter's disappearance crept closer, heavy as a storm. Ellen dreaded the date, not knowing what to say or do. Her mother baked a cake, Leah drew a family picture with 4 smiling stick figures, and Matt went for a long bike ride. Ellen spent the evening on the porch, tracing the stars, feeling every memory as sharp as broken glass, but also a strange new peace, a sense that, while the past would always haunt them, it didn't have to define what came next. As crickets sang in the yard and the house settled around her, Ellen closed her eyes, breathed deeply, and let herself hope for sleep, for healing, and for the strength to carry on. The 2nd September since Peter's disappearance arrived with chilly mornings and a hush in the air. Ellen woke each day before sunrise, sitting with her coffee at the kitchen table, listening to the quiet before Leah and Matt stirred. The ache for answers remained, a part of her now, as familiar as breath. School started. Leah picked out her own clothes, excited for her new teacher, carrying a worn picture of the family in her backpack. Matt entered high school, taller, voice deeper, his face set with determination. He signed up for cross-country and volunteered to help younger kids with homework. Ellen watched them with pride and a twinge of sadness, aware of how loss had changed them. The house felt smaller and sturdier at once. Ellen's mother still visited, sometimes staying for days, bringing soup and small gifts. She and Ellen worked in the garden, harvesting the last tomatoes, pulling weeds, sharing stories, sometimes about Peter, more often about the future. Ellen's support group met every Thursday. She listened, nodded, shared her own stories. A new member, her eyes shadowed, clutching a purse with white-knuckled hands, sat in the corner, silent at first. After the meeting, Ellen lingered, offering a gentle word, knowing how hard it was to speak the pain aloud. There were still hard days. Some mornings, Leah cried for no reason. Matt grew quiet after school, or snapped at Ellen over small things. The car broke down again, the basement flooded during a heavy rain. Bills came, but Ellen managed them with quiet determination, a sense of hard-earned competence settling into her bones. Good days appeared, too, movie nights with popcorn, Leah's first solo in the school concert, Matt laughing at a joke with friends. Ellen took photos and filled new albums, determined to mark the present, not just the loss. On the anniversary of Peter's disappearance, the family lit a candle at the kitchen table. Ellen let the children share memories, a camping trip, a joke, the way Peter made pancakes on Sundays. Leah cried, Matt stared at the flame, and Ellen squeezed their hands, feeling the ache and love mingle. When the candle burned low, they made a silent promise, to remember, but also to keep going. That night, Ellen stood in the doorway of each child's room, watching them sleep. She pressed her palm to her own heart, whispered a wish into the quiet, and then crawled into bed, pulling the old quilt around her shoulders. The ache of Peter's absence would never fully leave. But in the stillness of the night, surrounded by the steady breathing of her children, Ellen understood. What haunted them had shaped them, but it did not define all that they were. Life, despite everything, went on.